Lanka's #1 sports hub. There's been a lot of changes since the last time I was around here. There's been a new government in the country, a brand new year, and we at ThePapare have got a brand new studio. But unfortunately though, the thing that has to change, that is Sri Lanka cricket's fortune in limited overs cricket, is what has not changed. But to talk about that and much more, looking into the future, what's coming up and what's going on, I have with me, as always, Jehan Mubarak. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sameer.
Right, so let's talk about the T20, the second match that we played that we lost quite unfortunately. Remember, the first match was washed out, the second match we lost, and the third match also we lost, and not just lost, but lost quite desperately, if I can use that word. 201 for 6 India scored when they batted first, and Sri Lanka couldn't even bat their entire 20 overs, 123 all out. Jehan, I don't want to go into every single detail of that game because going to India and playing against India is always a challenge. You know, any cricket team would say India is the biggest challenge right now in cricket right now. But I think the least we could expect is at least put up a fight. We are not saying go out there and win all and come back, but at least put up a fight, show that you can get close to India. What did you make of the whole, could I call it a debacle?
I think we didn't expect a lot in terms of results from this tour. And as you say, to put up a fight, but I think we were way out of our depth, especially with our batting, with the extra pace and bounce of the Indian fast bowlers. We were struggling to score runs, to score boundaries, and in a situation like that, when you feel that your skill level doesn't match that of the opposition, you tend to panic, and then you take a lot of panic options, trying to hit the ball too hard. And when you're chasing 201 runs, invariably what happens is you get bowled out for a low score. So there is a big that this series, as Mickey Arthur said before the tour, that this will give an accurate gauge of where we are, and that is exactly what we have seen. We have seen where we are in terms of international limited over cricket, and okay, so now we know where we are. Let's start working on it.
Which is way below, at least in my opinion. And there's a lot of hard work to be done. Mickey Arthur, especially as a coach, needs to look into each and every detail, especially with the batsmen. You know, the way they approach the innings. A lot of people are talking about changes in the team, the kind of personnel that were put into each game. One question that a lot of people raised was the dropping of Bhanuka Rajapaksa after just one game. He impressed a lot in that tour to Pakistan, which was a very young side. He batted very well alongside some of the youngsters. But one failure and dropping him, a lot of people thought that was unfair. What's your take on that?
Yeah, anyway, it's unfair. I think for any player, whether it's a batsman or a bowler, playing one game and then being dropped is unfair. Also, he batted at #7 in that game that he did.
Which is not in his position.
Which is out of position for him. I would have played him higher up the order. But again, I mean, that's one thing that if we are going to sort these problems out, we need to be consistent with our selections, and the positions that we play our batsmen in particularly.
And I mean, Virat Kohli demonstrated a very good example in that game because he wanted to promote some of his younger players. He wanted them to bat in their positions. He came down at #6, and perhaps Sri Lankan batsman can take a leaf out of his book.
Yeah, that's what India now start. They are trying to figure out their batting order. They've got Rahul, Dhawan vying for places with Rohit Sharma coming back, so they will have that same problem. But they will always, but I say, is bat your best batsmen in their best positions.
They've got a good headache, if you call it that way. Okay, let's focus on some of the positive individual performances, because there were a few, and especially that of Lakshan Sandakar. Now, there were a few doubts about his ability in terms of performing in pressure situations, especially against very good teams like India. People questioned about his inclusion in the team despite not having the best of records, but he did come back with 4 wickets in that game, despite going for a few runs. Now, that's a debate that I like to have with a lot of people, Jehan Mubarak. They always say that, you know, it doesn't matter if he leaks runs, but if he gets you wickets in the middle overs, it's worth having him in the team. What is your take on that?
Yeah, in T20 cricket, it's always worthwhile having a wicket taker, because a wicket taker can change. You're going to go for runs. You're going to get hit for runs in T20 cricket. So if you want to change the game, you have to be able to take wickets, and if you have wicket takers in your team. I wasn't 100% convinced about Sandakar's inclusion because in the past he hasn't had the consistency with the white ball, so I always felt he's better for the longer format rather than for the shorter format. But in this game, in this series, he's bowled pretty well. He's got more control back. But what will be interesting is in Australia. So we are preparing for a T20 World Cup in Australia. Whether he will be equally effective in Australia, and whether we can play 2 spinners or whether we need a fast bowling all-rounder.
Speaking of those 2 spinners, I think he'll be competing with the other good performance that we had. One in the Hasaranga, 2 leg spinners. Hasaranga again maybe didn't get that many wickets, but he had control, and I think If you ask me, I'd have him in the team rather than Sandakan in Australia. What do you think?
I think Hasaranga has got more control. He offers more with the bat for sure. And also the leg spinner, and we've seen that in T20 cricket, wrist spinners, whether it's the Chinaman or the right arm leg spinners, are coming into the scene big time. We saw Zampa against Australia recently, and I don't know what it is about wrist spinners, but batsmen struggle to read them through the air and off the pitch.
Right, so we spoke about the bowlers, but let's get back to the batting now. I think one thing that Jehan said, which I fully agree with, is the fact that our batsmen are trying to play one shot too many, and I think the one batsman that demonstrated the opposite of that was, I mean, from Sri Lankan side, obviously the Indian batsmen were milking the ball. You take someone like KL Rahul, he showed the perfect example of how to, depend on timing rather than trying to hit the ball to Jupiter, something like what Kusal Perera was trying to do. But Dhananjay De Silva, for that matter, even I had my doubts of his inclusion in a T20 team because he's not someone who can clear the boundary that easily, but he showed to the other batsmen that you can make runs even with conventional batting.
Correct, very correct. T20 cricket is not about clearing the boundary, and Sri Lanka, we are not a country, we are not
like West Indians,
we're not people who can clear boundaries. That's not our game, and if we try to play that game, we are going to end up with results like this. And we are very good at timing the ball, using the pace, maneuvering the ball, running quickly between wickets, ones and twos. That's our game. That's how we score 200 runs. We can score 200 runs, but not by hitting boundaries and sixes, as Dhananjay showed, and as KL Rahul showed against Lahiru Kumara, who was still bowling high 140s. And he was just timing the ball. So that's one thing that all our batsmen need to bring into our game, to get behind the line of the ball, and rather than trying to hit it too hard, just use the pace and time it.
Caress it, as the coaches say, just caress the ball to the boundary. And I think there was a stat in the broadcast, in the official broadcast, they showed where the exact same delivery that KL Rahul got, to which Avishka Fernando got out. It was pitching on a middle length, moving away from him towards the off stump, and Rahul was just timing it beautifully, whereas Avishka Fernando was trying to hit it too hard, which resulted in his downfall. That's a perfect example of how, like he said, in T20 cricket, it's not all about just hitting. It also reminds me of that partnership between Shehan Jayasuriya and Bhanuka Rajapaksa in Pakistan. They weren't getting the boundaries initially, but they kept rotating the strike, and eventually the loose balls came. That's what it is. Right. One more person I want to talk about is the return of Angelo Matthews into the team. We saw a few of his sixes, reminded of us of the golden days, of back when he used to clear the boundary with ease, but he didn't do that well with the ball. Would you still bowl him alongside the fast bowlers when you go to Australia, or would you play him as a pure batsman?
Depends on the situation that he has to bowl in. I mean, if we want him to come and take wickets, probably not. But because we're always in the situation in the middle overs that we need to take wickets, but if we need to contain, Angelo has experience, but he's batting, he adds a lot of value to the team as a batsman, and I was surprised that he didn't play the first game, or the second game rather. So he has to be in that batting lineup, in that middle order, to hold things together.
And when he was batting with Dhananjay De Silva in the second innings, in the second match, it almost seemed as if we might reach the target.
And he's done that. He can, and he's another batsman who can bat with the tail. He has shown that in the past. So he can put on partnerships with the bowlers, and that's another skill which that experience that he has to be able to put on partnerships with the low order is going to be very useful to us.
Well, I guess trying times for Sri Lanka cricket, that's what we can say. Unfortunately, we lose a series and then we look at little positives. Hopefully these little positives can build up to become a good unit that performs consistently. One last question on that T20 series, and this is the most important one. Soon as the series was over, when the Sri Lankan players came back, the immediate question was on Lasith Malinga's captaincy. I know you're smiling, Jehan, because that's a tough question. And the one thing he said was, if the class doesn't do well, you can't blame the monitor. But Malinga himself went for quite a few runs. They didn't pick up a few wickets. So a lot of people are saying, listen, perhaps he's a very good bowler, but when it comes to leadership and man management skills, maybe it's time to try someone else.
Just in general, one thing I am not happy with, I'm not comfortable with, is this shifting of blame. The selectors blame the players, the administrators blame the selector, the sports minister blames Sri Lanka cricket or the players. The captain blames the team blames the toss, the pitch, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's all part of the game.
You don't
That's
perform,
professional cricket. You don't perform, you don't perform. And changing the captain is not going to change the way we play cricket.
True.
We need to change our cricket structure, our domestic structure. We need to change our approach to the game. If we do that, then whoever captains, we will win. Lasith Malinga is an exceptional bowler, and he's been in good form in the white ball. India play Lasith Malinga better than any other team.
True.
Because they've played
their
against
IPL
him,
experiences.
because they've played against him so many times. So we need to understand that. Whereas when we play against New Zealand, when we played at home, Lasith Malinga was all over them, 4 wickets in 4 balls. So he definitely adds value as a bowler. As a captain, when things are not going your way, anyone is going to struggle. So maybe you can have that debate about whether Malinga should captain, Angelo should captain, Dasun Shanaka should captain. It doesn't matter who captains, because that really is not a problem that is going to solve anything. Solving that problem, we need to solve the much bigger problem, is our cricket structure, how we prepare for a series. Our preparation for the India series was very poor, and how we're going to prepare for the series coming up. If we do that, to me it really doesn't matter who captains.
Okay, so Jehan's words that it's not the leadership that's the issue, the problems are much more deep rooted, and that is to do with the domestic structure and all of that. I guess the entire system needs a change, which is what everyone's talking about in this country right now, the system change. Anyway, unfortunately, after that series loss, it's the 17th series loss for Sri Lanka against India, which is a very bad record to have, and we last won a series against them way back in 2008. Now that's more than a decade ago. So I guess the only way, like Jehan says, is to really relook at the entire system and how things are run, and perhaps maybe go forward and start matching India in the way they've set up. Take an example from them, and perhaps nurture new young talent that can come up and take the mantle for Sri Lanka forward. Speaking of young talent, and we move on to the next subject on this program, which is the Sri Lanka under-19 team, which is in South Africa right now playing the World Cup. They played two warm-up matches. They won one against South Africa and the other one against Pakistan. They lost. They did a few changes in the two games, Jehan. We were discussing it pre-show, and I think you weren't so happy with too many shufflings, too many changes being made in the batting order when it comes to practice matches, because you're trying to use that as a platform to build to the main games.
Yeah, the under-19 team has been doing a lot of good things in the same way that we spoke about preparation and getting ready. The Sri Lanka under-19 team has been preparing for this World Cup very well. Their practices, even their selection to an extent, has been consistent in picking the squads, and the balance of the squads and the balance of the teams that they have picked have been good. But just in these last two warm-up games, I saw a bit of a deviation from that, where they've changed things around. Number 3s are betting at number 7, number 7s are betting at number 4 or 5, which is a bit difficult for. Maybe they're trying to give them exposure in those conditions, but I still think that you need to figure out your best batsmen, give them extra exposure in those conditions, and prepare for the World Cup.
Yes, yeah, there you go. Then Jehan's words of advice, if any one of you are watching from South Africa, communicate this message to our under-19 team there. Right, we spoke about the T20. Let's go to the other extreme, the Test format, which Sri Lanka hasn't been doing that bad, to be honest. We won a couple of good series last year, but we did lose to Australia, and then we did lose to Pakistan more recently. We're going to Zimbabwe, and the squad has been announced, and everyone is talking about it. I mean, you can't help but avoid the topic. The squad is pretty much very similar to what the squad was last time, only a couple of changes, and that is Suranga Lakmal comes back, and obviously the most notable omission of all is Kusal Janit Pereira. Now, I want to talk about a bit, because Jehan, this is something that everyone's talking about. This is a guy who won us a very special Test match maybe a few months ago, and after that he's played only 5 innings in which he's hasn't performed. But the argument is that a lot of people will say this, that it takes a special player to win a special Test match like that for someone, and it doesn't matter whether he's in form or out of form, you have to have him as a permanent fixture in your team. Do you agree with me?
I agree. In short, I agree.
Yes. No, but what do you make of his omission in overall? I mean, even the explanation given by the head of selectors, what did you make of it?
Look, I don't like explanation. It wasn't a great explanation, to be honest, because I think the actual reason is because they want Niroshan Dikwala to keep.
Right.
So they've already made the decision that Dikka is going to keep, and therefore Kusal cannot find a place in the team. I think that's the real reason. And they don't want to carry Kusal on the team as a fielder, and play both of them at the same time. But about occupying the crease and yes, 150s, I don't think that's really a good explanation. Also, we had the option of having him in a squad of 16. We could have increased the squad to 16 and not having a 15-member squad, because we always give ourselves the option of playing him or whoever, a batsman in the second test, because looking at the squad, I feel that we are still a batsman short, and we have committed ourselves to a particular batting lineup. If someone gets injured, if someone gets out of form, we're going to have problems in the second test match.
Right. So Thirumanne goes there to occupy the crease. Apparently, do you think he'll open the batting, or will it still be Oshada and Dimuth? Just
Oshada and Dimuth. By looking at the squad, it probably looks like Thiri will not play. So you will have Mendes 3, Matthews 4, Chandimal 5, Dhananjay 6, Dickwella 7. So that's your 7 batsmen, and then you have 4 bowlers. So it still looks a bit thin on the batting. And then you have Thirumanne waiting outside, and also it puts a lot of pressure on Thirumanne, because when selector comes out and says we want Thirumanne to occupy the crease, then Thirumanne has to go and occupy the crease. He can't do anything else, because he's left Kusal Janit out of the team. Simply because of his ability to occupy the crease. So it's not, I don't think we should be putting players in situations like that.
Right, there you go. Then we go to Harare and play 2 test matches. Both the matches will be in Harare. The first one begins on Sunday, the 19th of January. Remember, Zimbabwe have been readmitted to the ICC, which means this is their first test after getting readmitted. And they have a new captain, Sean Williams. What do you know about him, Jehan? Have you been watching him play?
Yeah, he is a good player. I think Zimbabwe cricket is probably in one of the few associations which are in a worse situation than we are, and they are still trying to get their best players in the team, getting them training together, because they play a lot of cricket outside Zimbabwe. They play in England, so getting that team together is a challenge. And but Sean Williams is very talented. He has played in Bangladesh. He has a lot of international experience. But we should not take them lightly. They are playing at home. They will tailor the pitches to suit them. So we should really, not step off the gear at all.
We should not. In fact, remember, it wasn't very long ago when Zimbabwe came to Sri Lanka and won an ODI series against us 3-2, which led to the resignation of Angelo Matthews as the captain. And remember, Sri Lanka has never lost a test against Zimbabwe. I'm afraid that we'll have to work very hard to keep that record on. Jehan, thank you for your insight. Before we finish, the answer to last week's question was Dasun Shanaka, who got 3 for 16 in Pune, which is the best T20 figures recently against India. The winner was Lakdev Jayawaruna. To keep up with obviously all of that we are doing here, if you like shows like this, where we analyze the sport, we talk about cricket and other games, and if you are generally a keen sports follower, do subscribe to the ThePapare page and click on that little bell icon next to it so that you're notified whenever we have new content coming up. Thank you, Jehan. It was lovely chatting with you.
Likewise, Sameer. Thank you.
There you go. That's the end of Around the Wickets for this week. We will see you next week, hopefully with some positive news all the way from Harare. Until then, it's goodbye from all of us here on ThePapare.com.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this. And don't forget to hit the bell icon for our latest content.